everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Shanka Show, where we can all learn something new about life in the Soviet Union. Здравствуйте, дорогие товарищи! В эфире программа Ushanka Show. In today's video, we'll continue our conversation about Soviet first responders or emergency services. Recently, I made a video about Soviet firefighters, and by the way, I would like to thank everyone who provided feedback regards my lessons of Russian language. So we'll go ahead and continue that part. I'm glad to hear that it helps a lot of people. And if you watch that video, you should remember that if you call 01, you're gonna reach firefighter department, and like this poster says, о пожаре звоните по телефону 01. Сообщите адрес, что горит, угрожает ли огонь людям. During the fire, unplanned fire, remember пожар, use the phone and call 01, and you need to tell the address, what's is burning, and is there any danger for people. And here are a couple other similar posters. О пожаре звоните по телефону 01. So once again, same message. In case of fire, call 01. And before we continue, I would like to mention something. I believe every Soviet kid, at least one, did a prank call and called 01 to scream there's a fire. We considered that was funny. I doubt the fire department responded, but I remember doing it. So that was kind of one of the entertainments we had, is to do prank calls using a payphone, since those calls were free. And in today's video, we're going to talk about what would happen, who you're going to reach if you call 02. And this stainless steel sign tells us бесплатно вызываются пожарная охрана 01, militsiya 02. Militia is 02. Militsiya. Militsiya. So militsiya is probably a more Soviet word than a Russian word, because it appeared in Russian language in November of 1917, shortly after October Revolution of 1917, and later it disappeared from Russian language as well as from Ukrainian language. In 2011, Russia changed name from militsiya to politsiya, to police, and in Ukraine it happened in 2015. I took this photo in summer of 2015, so pretty much shortly after Ukrainian militia, militsiya, became Ukrainian politsiya, police, and they got brand new cool looking Priuses. I'm not sure how many of you recognize this guy, but this is Dmitry Medvedev, who was president of Russia between 2008 and 2012. He was a part of famous Rokirovka, castling move, when Putin became a vice president for 4 years and Medvedev became a president. Then 4 years later, during another re-election, Medvedev suggested, hey, how about we're going to re-elect Putin again? Everyone said, yay, let's do it. And Putin got another 2 terms. Not much was going on during Medvedev rule. Well, it was still Putin's rule. But they raised retirement age in Russia, as well as renamed militia into politsiya. Oh yeah, and I almost forgot. Comrade Medvedev knew how to dance. He had some good moves that would put Napoleon Dynamite to shame. And now we return to our regularly scheduled programming. So militia was another Soviet word introduced to the Russian language instead of police. We had militsiya, just like instead of minister, we got people's commissar. When militia was created on November 10, 1917, it was called рабочая militia, workers' militia. And 2 years later, in 1919, it became рабочая крестьянская militia, workers and peasants militia. Similarly, the full title of Red Army was рабочая крестьянская красная армия, workers and peasants Red Army. And I guess until 1931, militia could be considered like actual militia, because it was controlled by local Soviets, local councils. But in 1931, militia became a part of NKVD, Народный комиссариат внутренних дел, People's Commissariat of Inner Affairs. And in 1946, when Soviet government decided to drop the whole concept of People's Commissars and People's Commissariats, everything was renamed back to ministries and ministers, and militia became a part of MVD, Ministry of Inner Affairs, and that's how I remember when I was a kid in the Soviet Union. Most Soviet people interacted with so-called участковый, so that will be kind of similar to what in America they call sheriff. So that'll be a милиционер who is in charge of the local area, участок, and he will have a small office, and he will be like boots on the ground. He will know all the people who live in the area. He will know all the troublemakers. And like in this case on this photo, If the kids broke the window, he will bring them to parents and talk to them, maybe write the report. So he was the guy who knew everyone in the area, and he's участковый. And I just went on Google Maps and I did the screenshot. So this used to be an office of our local участковый when I lived on Молодогвардейская street on Chokolovka when I was a kid, and I was like pretty much everyone latchkey kid. We went to school, came back to school when parents were still at work, both parents. And then, you had your lunch, do your homework, and you play outside with other kids. And we've been hanging out in this area quite often. Sometimes we will go inside to say hello. The cop will be at his desk doing paperwork. And he was участковый. It looks like now it's not being used anymore. And a part of the участковый job will be patrolling the streets of his area. Like you see this photo. Well, he's been helped by so-called дружинники. So that's the people who volunteered to help the cops to patrol the areas and, keep the order under control. So in this case, you got two дружинники and one участковый. And they noticed there's a couple young guys drinking alcohol in a public area, so now they're talking to them. Just like in this poster from 1957, shows once again участковый and two helpers, two дружинники. They rush in to the fight next to the restaurant, and this poster says that участковый should use help of local people in his work. So участковый, local sheriff, had just office. There was no facilities to place arrested people. For that, they had a separate buildings or part of the building. It was called отдел militsiya. So there was a police department, and that one had real facilities, with the places to lock people up, interrogations rooms and stuff like that. And the next level of militia was so-called уголовный розыск, a criminal police. Oops, wrong photo. Okay, much better. So once again, criminal police, уголовный розыск, and could be translated as a criminal search. So those guys will be working with more serious crimes like robberies, murders, and so on. And of course, we also had traffic police, which was called ГАИ, Государственная автоинспекция, State Auto Inspection. So it's a really bizarre name. It was still called militia, but they were not милиционеры, they were инспекторы, автоинспектор. And just like everywhere else, their main job was pretty much watching for speeding, car accidents, and other problems on the road. And of course, out of all the militia jobs, being a traffic cop, being a ГАИ, автоинспектор would be the most lucrative job because that's where you could get bribes. I love this photo. It's beautiful mustache, and it's also beautiful golden teeth. So this guy probably worked somewhere in Georgia, Armenia with Azerbaijan, and he was doing just fine. And of course, you need to remember that not many people in the Soviet Union owned a car. Finally, I found some statistics so I can give you real numbers. So here it says how many cars in private ownership per 1,000 people. In 1975, in the city, there were 17 cars per 1,000 people. Out in the country, 13 cars per 1,000. So can you imagine 17 cars per 1,000 people? So even if you do by family, if you divide it by 3, it means there was 17 cars for every 333 families. So hardly any cars. That's why we had quite empty roads, hardly ever traffic jams. Beautiful life. Soviet police cars, doesn't matter traffic police or criminal police, was usually dark yellow with dark blue stripe, as you see at this picture. And the most popular car in the 80s, of course, was a Lada Vaz 01 Kopeyka. But they also used UAZ Bobik SUVs like on this photo, as well as older Gaz SUVs like you see at this picture. They also were called Bobik. Large Gaz Volga cars were also used for police, and even underpowered Moskvich cars, but I personally don't recall ever seeing cops driving Moskvich. It looks like in Moscow they also used RAF minivans built in Latvia, and on this photo it looks like they had some serious speed gun installed on the top of that van. I was quite surprised when I stumbled on this photo. This is Polish-made Zhuk minivan. I've seen those in Kiev, but never used by militia. And of course, due to the shortage of cars in many areas, they utilized Ural or Dnieper motorcycles with a sidecar. And this is one of my favorite photos showing Soviet traffic police in action. I don't remember exactly what was going on. I think maybe a driver had a heart attack, but I don't know, that looks like a cop not gonna make it. And Soviet traffic police even had helicopters. So as you see, most Soviet police departments used domestic cars, Ladas, Volgas or Moskvich, except Moscow. Over the years, Moscow police and mostly traffic police utilized some interesting vehicles, including older models of Mercedes-Benz, newer models of, well, relatively newer models of Mercedes-Benz, as you see at these pictures. Here you're looking at a beautiful black Tatra 613. I believe they were made in Czechoslovakia, and right behind the Tatras, you could see there's a Mercedes nose sticking out, and further down road, all are Volgas. Moscow traffic police also used BMWs, and by the way, do you know why Soviet cops as well as blondes like BMWs so much? Because it's so easy to spell. Even some Audis end up in the service of the Moscow traffic police, and they actually had a different color scheme here. Now they're white with dark blue. And some even had Nissan Patrol. Now I must tell you, back in 1990s, I thought Nissan Patrol was the coolest SUV on the planet. When I found this photo, I thought it was a Photoshop, but then I did a little research and it confirmed that, in fact, Moscow traffic police had two Porsches in their service for a little bit, but that was more like a test models. They were trying to figure out if it makes sense to have cars like that in Moscow to catch bad guys. Okay, what else did I miss? Well, there is nothing sexy about this vehicle, but militia also participated in picking up drunks on the streets, and that's what you see here. They tossing him into the windowless truck, which will be delivered to Vitrizvitel, like sober house, and that's where they're gonna spend the night and pay a lot of money for the service. Women can also serve in Soviet militia, but mostly they were working in the traffic police. Soviet militia published their own magazine called, well, Soviet Militia, Sovetskaya Militsiya. Also need to mention that Soviet militia had their own sports club. It was called Dinamo. Any of you who in international sports may recognize Dinamo Kiev, famous soccer team, or Dinamo Moskva. Those had a soccer team and hockey team. So there were a lot of Dinamos. Dinamo Tbilisi, I believe it was Dinamo Minsk. So that means that sports club belonged to the local police, local militia, and all the players in that team were actually militia members. They had officers' ranks, but of course they never served. They only played sports. The most famous slogan about Soviet militia was "Моя милиция меня бережет." My militia is protecting me or is guarding me. It was written by famous Soviet poet Vladimir Mayakovsky in one of his poems. But there was another slogan which sounded very similar to "Моя милиция меня бережет," my militia is protecting me, to "Моя милиция меня стережет," my militia is guarding me, like I'm under arrest. And in English it's actually even funnier, because бережет could be translated as guarding, and guarding would be like protecting, or you are under guard, you're being arrested. Моя милиция меня бережет, моя милиция меня стережет. And just like in America, where police officers are called cops, we also had slang words for our militiamen. The normal one, like polite one, was мент, and the rude one was мусор. So I'm not sure how close word милиционер to мусор, but musar means like garbage. So you can say there's a ment or he is a musar. And speaking of my personal interaction with Soviet militia, I really didn't have any. I was a nerd. I never got in trouble. I wasn't doing any stupid, drinking. Well, we did some stealing as little kids, but it went under radar. I never got in trouble with militia. So I never had problems either way with them. Well, my friends, I believe it's all I can tell you about Soviet police. I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please don't forget to like it, maybe comment, maybe share, and we'll talk to you soon. До свидания, goodbye.